Welcome. Wait, is it start? Oh, it is start. Okay, welcome back, everyone. Oh man, it's been a long time. This is another. Okay, we're going through a little branding, rebranding. Professor Odette. Okay, we're just trying it out. Odette the priest. When you're looking for science podcasts, is a little out of context. But Professor Odette, I'm not a professor. That's kind of the meme part of it. But I think it's just a little more inviting to some, science discussion. Welcome back. Either way, we're going to try out Professor Odette for a little while. This is episode 5 of season 1, where I'm a disciplined priest healer in World of Warcraft. I'm going to be healing a Mythic Plus dungeon, and I discuss basic scientific topics. And I am a pharmaceutical chemist, so I mostly study chemistry to treat disease. So I come up with, different cancer medicines is what I study. But today we're not going to be talking about that. Today we'll be talking about something I wasn't even planning on doing an episode about. I wouldn't have never thought of it hadn't I had a little conversation with my sister, actually. A week ago, I had a dream that I died in a nuclear explosion. And I was talking to my sister about it because my sister is into astrology. And she was thinking, I was thinking it was a anxiety dream or something because of what's going on in the news or whatever. She was thinking it had something more to do with the moon and cancer. Now, I don't know what any of that means, but it could be a little of both. You never know. But when we were talking about that, we got talking also about, nuclear bombs, what to do if a nuclear bomb hit, all that type of. I'm sure everyone has had similar conversations at this point. Maybe not serious. It feels like kind of a meme still, but who knows. But today I'm not going to talk about only that because I am going to focus on the medicine side. But I realized that maybe there's, radioactivity and radioisotopes are used in medicine pretty prevalently. And in science in general, not even just medicine, but in science in general, they're pretty commonplace. Like, we learn about them as undergraduates. I've even had a graduate course on it. I myself have worked with radioactive elements. I've done a couple of reactions and stuff myself, and I wouldn't have even thought about it because it's kind of commonplace, but then just talking with her, I realized, oh, you know what, maybe there's people would be interested in kind of just learning about the general basics of, radioactive decay and radioactive isotopes, both the harmful effects and the therapeutic effects that we can utilize it for. So I thought it'd make for a pretty cool episode. So this episode all stemmed from a bad dream I had where I died to a nuclear explosion. But it brings us all hopefully a really cool episode. So the way by now you kind of realize, I don't plan much ahead of time. I just basically just from the top of the dome kind of just put together an episode, just rambling. Hopefully I make a little bit of sense. This is not necessarily my expertise. I'm not a physicist, but I have learned a lot about these compounds because they are used in medicine pretty prevalently, honestly. Imaging, mostly imaging. We use radioisotopes for imaging all the time. If you've ever had an MRI or if you've had like a PET scan, a PET scan, you have been exposed to radioisotopes. Why aren't you dead? Well, we know a lot more about them than we first did, when we first discovered these things. So we know how to keep people safe. We know how to keep ourselves as scientists safe when we're working with these things. And so honestly, they've just sort of become commonplace. And so it might be kind of cool just to hear about how I work with them first, as people use them for try to come up with cures for cancer and other diseases. Or just imaging techniques, new imaging techniques using radioisotopes. That's what I've used them for. So I haven't used them to kill cells, like cancer cells. I've used them for imaging. So for example, I will make a new cancer therapeutic that I think is getting to the tumor. So I have, let's say I put the tumor in a mouse model, and I want to see if my therapeutic is actually getting to the tumor or not. Maybe it's getting stuck in the liver, or maybe it's going somewhere else entirely that I don't want it to go. I can label my therapeutic with an isotope and then use various imaging techniques to see where it's ended up in the mouse. Hopefully it's ended up in the tumor, right? But sometimes that's not the case. Sometimes something happens and you didn't realize it's going to get stuck in the liver for whatever reason, and you realize your therapeutic's actually getting stuck in the liver. That's something you would want to know, right, before you ever try to move on to like a human study. So for imaging, that's very common, and so I have to get trained basically on how to use radioactive isotopes so that I can keep myself safe, so that I don't expose people in my lab to radioactive emissions. And so that's what we're going to be talking about here. So I haven't really thought too much about this. I've thought like half a day about this episode, so hopefully it's coherent and it all makes sense. But I think we need to start our discussion with a just basic understanding around what radio isotopes are. What does that even mean? What am I saying? Also, this word decay, like what's decaying? What does that mean exactly? So let's just kind of jump in. We'll start our discussion with that. Guy just my prop paladin, or my rep paladin just laid on hands my tank when he had like 20 stacks. It's gonna hit me, isn't it? Ugh. No one interrupted that thing. Okay, so we're running into a little difficulty here, but we should be fine. I don't think we'll wipe here. Okay, he heals himself. I gotta dispel. Okay, we're fine. Absolutely 100% fine. We didn't even have any deaths there. We're insane. Okay, so let's just define, radioisotopes. Radioactive decay. Let's just get some definitions so we're all on the same page as to what all these things are. So, if you think of the periodic table, we're not going to get too in-depth here, so don't get overwhelmed. Don't overwhelm yourself. But the periodic table, right, is just a list of all the different known elements. So what does that mean? What is an element? An element is just an atom that has a very specific arrangement of things that are making that atom. Protons, electrons, neutrons. So every atom on the periodic table has its own unique set of neutrons, protons, and electrons. So if you go find that element in a cave in wherever, Alaska or something, and you just stumble upon a pure element, you're going to be able to know exactly how many protons, neutrons, and electrons that element is going to have, because for the most part, it's pretty constant. Now, elements can have different numbers of neutrons or electrons, and they exist, right? And we can observe them. But the problem is they're not in the most stable form. The periodic table tells us what the stable form is, so if we deviate from that, if we find an element, an atom that's different from what it should be, it just means it's less stable. Now, what does that mean when it's less stable? Well, over time, it's going to fall apart. It's going to break down. And that's what we call decay. It's going to decay. And when it decays, it doesn't, turn into nothing. It basically just falls apart. It'll fall into two pieces. Two smaller elements, maybe. And when it does that, it releases large amounts of energy, or little tiny particles that are high energy that can shoot out, with high velocity. And so, as this happens, let's say plutonium, you have some plutonium, and it has one of the isotopes that are radioactive, meaning it's going to fall apart over time. As those individual atoms fall apart and decay, they're going to release energy. And that energy is what is destructive to living organisms. Anything that has like DNA, because that energy can penetrate through molecules, through tissue, through cells, through molecules, and it will change the molecules. It will destroy molecules, and so as it penetrates, you can picture like I guess like a really tiny bullet or something. These little energy beams will just shoot through a cell or shoot through tissue, and kind of just leave a wave of destruction, a path of destruction, everywhere it goes. So that's what causes like tissue damage, but we're going to get there. So basically, those are kind of the general definitions. A radioactive isotope is an atom that has a non-natural amount of neutrons, basically, too many, and so the nucleus is unstable. It's going to fall apart over time. And that rate of decay is different for every isotope. So depending on the isotope, sometimes the isotope's like relatively stable. Like, hey, this thing it's not going to fall apart right away. This thing's like relatively stable. It'll fall apart over maybe 100 years. Some isotopes are so stable that they can stay together for thousands of years, whereas other isotopes are so unstable that we can only observe them for like a fraction of a second, a nanosecond. By the time we observe it, it's already fallen apart and decayed. So it just depends. But every time they decay, they're releasing energy. They're releasing high energy particles that are shooting off at high velocity. But what we're interested in a lot of the time is that rate of decay, which we call a half-life. So if we watch, like let's say we find some plutonium out in a cave somewhere, and then we're holding that in a lab, we can monitor how much plutonium has fallen apart over time. And when we get to half the plutonium falling apart, that's what we call its half-life. And every isotope has a half-life that's characteristic to that isotope. So that's usually how we measure how fast or how slow an isotope decays, is just the half-life. So some half-lives are seconds, some half-lives are thousands of years. Just depends. Okay, so that's sort of like general information there about isotopes. Half-life. Let's talk about this idea of penetrance. What does that mean? So, depending on the type of when an atom falls apart, depending on the type of energy that it releases, that energy can penetrate further through stuff, through material. If we're talking about like a human being, we're talking about, is it more superficial? Is it just going to be like stopped by the skin? Versus, can it penetrate all the way through my body? Can it just, like a bullet, just shoot straight through my body and kind of destroy all the tissue that's in its path, basically? So those are the, it depends, and we need to sort of talk about and define the different types of penetrance. So in general, when an isotope falls apart, it can generate 3 types of energy. And we don't really need to know the names so much, but basically alpha, beta, or gamma emission. And it just, they're defined basically on how far they can penetrate. So the first one, the alpha emission, it's actually emitting a particle. It has mass, but it's really small. But since it has mass, it can't really penetrate very far. It'll get stuck on, we learn in our classes that like a single sheet of paper can stop most of it. Like it can't even penetrate a sheet of paper. So this is like this is radioactive stuff that would kind of like land on your clothes and maybe, land on your skin, just be on your body. Very small amount of penetrance. The beta decay, a little smaller, and you actually release some. Trying to like keep it simple words here, like electromagnetic energy, but energy, like it can penetrate a little further, so it can go through the skin, get into tissue, and so it leaves like kind of, you can picture like a bullet, you know, and it will just, anything in its path sort of gets destroyed or changed or reacted with or whatever. And then the last one, gamma. Gamma emission is strictly energy, so it's like a beam of energy that can shoot all the way through a person. Can go. It has enough penetrance that the thickness of a person can't stop it. So it'll just shoot right through, and whatever's in its way is just gonna get. It's gonna. The gamma ray is gonna shoot right through molecules, right through cells, tissue. You know, leave a little bit of a. They're really small, but it's gonna leave, you know, like a destructive path, like a bullet hole, but tiny. With you know, we're talking in generalities here. So those are the three type of emissions. So let's first talk about medicine. How can we use these in medicine? Well, isotopes are not all the same. They're gonna, and then dosing is also very, very important, right? So if you only have a tiny bit of these radioactive isotopes, you're not exposing a person to large amounts of radiation, and there's a limit for how much exposure someone is allowed to get. And that's all based off of like statistics and relativeness, so definitely not a true science for all humans. But for example, like an X-ray, you're getting hit with gamma radiation. The beams are going straight through your body. If it didn't, then we wouldn't be able to see anything, right? Like we would, and the X-ray wouldn't show. We wouldn't be able to. There would be no X-ray, basically. You need to be able to penetrate through the body so that you can pick up an image on the other side. But we'll just stick. So what we can do, the low penetrating, like the alpha and the beta emitters, when they're outside of the body, hitting us, you know, our skin does a pretty good job at protecting us from that type of emission. But if we inhale those particles, or if we swallow them, or if they get into our bloodstream, you know, now there's no skin to protect us. They have direct access to cells, you know, and they can just penetrate and start getting into our DNA, change our DNA. But at low doses, we can still use them as therapeutics, so, or imaging techniques. But so we can use, you know, alpha or beta emitters in small doses to treat cancer. If we can attach like a radioactive isotope to a targeting molecule, like an antibody, for example. Antibodies are really good at finding cancer cells. We can attach, you know, a radioactive isotope to a cancer cell, and then it's basically a drug, put the drug therapy, inject it into the blood. The antibody will find the cancer cell, and then the isotope will decay right in the vicinity of the cancer tumor, for example. And then we can effectively treat cancer with that type of system. And I know there's a lot of those under development right now. It's a very hot topic. But I don't think there's anything FDA approved as of now, but I'm sure there will be very soon. There might be something FDA approved that I just haven't learned about yet or haven't heard of yet. So, but those things are, you know, lots of people are interested in that type of stuff, where you're attaching things to antibodies like a radioactive isotope to cure cancer, to treat cancer. So you can get the decay to occur inside a tumor and kill the tumor without hopefully killing too much of the healthy tissue around the tumor. And obviously there's a lot of science that goes into that. You need to use specific isotopes to control penetrance. Now, the imaging is mostly what I do. So we attach an isotope. I use zirconium. If you look up zirconium on the periodic table, you can find it there. But there's a radioactive isotope of zirconium. with a half-life that I think is on the order of like 4 hours or something, and it's really good for imaging. So it'll release a particle that I can detect, and I can hopefully, find out where my therapeutic is going in the body. So if you have ever had a PET scan, you've probably taken or an MRI. I think they use them for MRIs too. TC 99, or is it 98? Tech 98. I think it's 98. Tech 98. It's a radioactive technetium isotope that has a half-life of 6 hours. And so you drink that before you go in for your MRI or whatever, and it'll get into your body, and then that isotope decay is what is being observed and producing an image. So it has a high amount of penetrance. It's gamma, and so we can observe it. Wait, positron electron microscopy. It might actually be beta. I think it's beta. Yeah, now I'm trying to turn my brain back to the class. It's either gamma or beta energy. It's enough penetrance that we can observe it, so it can get through tissue and get to the detectors on the MRI or the PET scan machine, so that we can observe your tissue and see what's going on inside your body. And then it has a half-life of 6 hours, which is useful in medicine, because then we could have the patient drink it in the morning, early morning hours, and then we just keep them in the hospital for like 24 hours or 18 hours or something. And that way 3 or 4 half-lives have gone by, and so they're not, one half-life has gone by, that means half of it is already decayed. 2 half-lives gone by, that means 75% is decayed. 3 half-lives, what is that, half of 20, 12.5% is left. So by the time 3 half-lives has gone by, you only have about 10% left in your body, and then you can probably go home. I don't know exactly when they let you home, but they're not going to let you go home when you have like radioactive material in your body still. So it has to be at a certain threshold before they'll let you go home. But okay, so we're almost done with this dungeon here, so I gotta kind of speed it up a little bit. So that's how we use it in medicine. We use it for imaging, and then people are using it for cancer killing. But let's say a nuclear bomb was dropped, and it was close to you, but you weren't at the blast site. You were just maybe, 5 miles downstream of the blast point or something. What happens when we detonate a nuclear bomb, there is so much energy, and we are breaking apart, like plutonium and uranium atoms. We're breaking those apart. Energy is being released. We're breaking apart other atoms. We're generating a lot of isotopes, radioactive isotopes. So atoms that have the wrong number of neutrons and electrons are being generated, and since the explosion's so big, those atoms are going clear up into the atmosphere, upper atmosphere even, and they're gonna so now they're at the jet stream. They're at the mercy of the winds. So wherever the winds are blowing, it's gonna blow those particles, and so over time they're gonna kind of settle down and like fall onto wildlife, humans, plants, anything that's living is at risk of getting damaged. So these radioactive isotopes are going to fall down. They're going to land on buildings, people, plants, animals, land on water. Then we're going to drink it, ingest it. We're going to be breathing these things. And so these things are going to get into our bodies. They're going to get on our bodies, and then they're going to decay. And yeah, that's obviously a problem. So it depends on 2 things. It depends on the amount of time you're exposed. Like if you were 5 miles downstream of a nuclear bomb that goes off, and you just stay there you just live the rest of your life there, like a few years or whatever, you're going to have so much radiation exposure that you're going to have so much tissue damage and mutations and stuff that, yeah, it's going to be very bad for you in the long run. Okay, so let's say a nuclear bomb goes off, you're 5 miles away. I don't know exactly. I'm not an expert at nuclear bombs, so I don't know. I'm guessing the 5 miles. You're some distance away to where you survived the blast. What's gonna happen is you're gonna have all these radioactive particles fall onto you and onto your house and onto your car and get in your water. They're gonna you're gonna be breathing this stuff in. So all the different emitters, you're gonna have the short penetrance ones, medium penetrance ones, and long penetrance ones on you, in your lungs. If you drink the water, it's gonna get into your blood. So these things are gonna start accumulating in your body. These radioactive isotopes are gonna accumulate in your body, and depending on their half-life, you know, some are stable for thousands of years, some are not stable, and they're gonna decay while you're alive. And when they decay, they're going to, you know, release energy. They're gonna kill all of your tissue. They're gonna kill tissue. They're gonna affect your DNA mostly, is what we're worried about. So they're gonna interact with your DNA, change your DNA, mutate your DNA, which will ultimately lead to cancer. If you're a pregnant female, the DNA changes are gonna affect your fetal development. Your fetus will probably have some, you know, has a risk of having defects and things. That's how all that happens. So, not good. So what, I guess, can we do to... I think it's kind of funny to think... I don't honestly think there's going to be a nuclear missile, but let's say you survive a blast, a nuke. What do? Well, you know you have radioactive particles on your body after the explosion, so you gotta throw your clothes away. You gotta get rid of the clothes that you were wearing. You gotta wash your exposed skin. You gotta wear something over your face so you're not breathing what's in the air, and you gotta get the hell out. you gotta leave. You gotta get. I live in Salt Lake City, Utah, so the jet stream comes from California and blows to the east. Let's say LA gets nuked. Sorry, LA, but LA gets nuked. The jet stream is going to blow all of those isotopes over to me. I'm downstream of that, and then we actually have like an inversion in Salt Lake City. If you've ever been there, in the winter we have this inversion where the heavier air sort of gets stuck in the valley, and so it gets really hazy at times. All of that is going to be like isotopes that I don't want to breathe. So if LA gets nuked, I'm headed north. I'm going to like northern Idaho. I'm going to let the jet stream blow all that past me. I'm going to be north of it. I'm going to be in Idaho. It's going to miss me. But all of Nevada, all of Utah, I don't know how far it's going to blow. Probably at least Colorado. They're going to be downstream. They're going to be in the fallout zone. So, yeah, you're going to have radioactive isotopes falling on you, raining down on you invisibly. And what's that going to present as? Well, the ones that are on your skin, they're going to present as burns, harsh burns. If you've ever seen Chernobyl, right? Just that one scene where the firefighter picks up that brick, and his hand like melts off. It's going to be like that. Not that bad, but over time, you're just going to these things are going to present as burns on your skin. Stuff that you inhale is going to affect your lungs. It'll probably be hard to breathe, I imagine. It's going to destroy lung tissue. And then, you know, over time, you'll probably start seeing some cancers arise. Anyway, that's the episode, I think. We're done with the key. The key actually went well. I didn't even talk much about the key at all. But, yeah, so that is radioactivity. That is radioactive isotopes. That's how they're used in medicine. And then we talked a little bit about nuclear fallout from a random nuclear bomb. I'm not saying there's a nuclear bomb going off. It's just interesting to talk about, and I was talking about it with my family. I don't know, kind of fun. Talk about, think about. Watch Chernobyl on HBO. It's a really cool TV series. If you want to learn more about this. But again, thank you for watching. That's episode 5. I'll continue. Once I think of some cool topics like this, we'll just continue with new episodes. Thanks for tuning in. Toss a like and a follow so you don't miss any more episodes, and I'll see you on the next one.